I would like to debunk divine timing. We create our divine timing. There's a lot out there about divine timing where we are passive, where we kind of just lay back and let divine timing bring us to our destiny. But we must remember that we are very much eternal beings. Eternal in the sense of we are not the same from lifetime to lifetime, but energy, right, cannot be created nor destroyed. So it's constantly transmuting itself, constantly. So when we think of the Big Bang, for example, basically everything about this universe is connected. The ingredients that made Earth is the same ingredients that made Pleiades, right? There's just constant transmutation of one solar system into the next, into the next. So when it comes to divine timing, since we are very much a part of reincarnation, we can create divine timing within our reincarnation. So what that means is in this lifetime, because our higher mind is connected to this finite space, but our higher mind is very much timeless. Is timeless, right? Where everything is happening simultaneously. So how do we anchor such seeming complexity into a finite space where we can contain it, right? What we call in our reality, in our 3D waking reality, right? It has a lot to do with our willingness to grow, right? And we all have a lot of ideas, right? We have a lot of visions. We receive messages in our dreams, right, from our higher self about opportunities or experiences that we can hold in this finite container called our reality. But the bridge, I understand the bridge from what we call this fifth dimensional concept of prosperity, creativity, and this 3D space, which is, we can say, our waking life, is our willingness to grow. And how much energy do you give to your growth? So we create divine timing, but there also is what we call, and this is what I learned pretty young, because I've always been really, what do you call, futurist, right? I've always been somewhat ahead of the trend, right? In many ways, there's a timing with the planet, right? Where, humans have evolution. And again, evolution it's not set in stone. That's the thing. It's not, we are expected to evolve by this time, right? Our willingness to grow on an individual level within our community and our collective through our ability to share, right? To share our creativity, our dharma, can actually create a quantum leap, or it can expedite growth. Think of like Nikola Tesla as a great example, right? If he was not here, we would probably, we would definitely have the technology age, because this is, right, the wheel, right, of the wheel of the planetary progression that puts us in an Aquarian age. So we will have technology, but the evolution of that, we may be, it might be a lot more evolutionally immature, right, without the Nikola Tesla. So, and his divine timing was on, he created his divine timing, right? He wanted to complete, just like a lot of sort of creators such as Yogi Bhajan and Nikola Tesla, they wanted to complete incarnations in a single life. So they knew that it would demand a lot of growth, right? Growth personally and emotionally. in order to hold a lot of wisdom or information or creativity in the container that is their waking, 3D life. So a lot of individuals such as, Nikola Tesla and Yogi Bhajan, people that I kind of explore, right? And their kind of embodiment in their mastery, they were holding a lot of energy of growth. A lot of energy of growth both psychologically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And that's why they were able to hold a divine timing that seemed quite revolutionary, right? In the way that a lot of times we think passively about divine timing, right? Where we have to wait and we have to wait and we have to wait, right? Like for myself, being very young, I never really waited when it came to sharing my creativity or developing my creativity, because I understood, just like Nikola Tesla and Yogi Bhajan, being ahead of the time, even, like Tesla, like thousands of years ahead of your time, might be the divine timing for you, right? So when we have growth and our willingness to grow, it really is about the development of the intuition that makes all the difference from just being passive and waiting and allowing time to go by, and you're not really paying attention, you're not sensitizing your system to really be alert, right? Intuition is really about alertness, right? We can talk about like awareness and being more conscious about your reality and your options, right? And your opportunities that are around you. But really it's the alertness that we can really drop into a year and really connect through our sort of just our, right, our guidance to what growth that we can create in this year that will give us the next level, right? And I think the next level, I don't necessarily, I mean, we could see it as like a vertical line, like next level is like, climbing a ladder, because we tend to look at things like very linear, right? But I see the next level as more of a spherical, in the way that you're embodying more of your creative reality. Okay, so we can see as vertical as you're getting to a next level, raising your vibration, right? Moving closer to source energy. But a part of the bridge is not necessarily just going into the source energy, right? We think of like the Holy Spirit having, again, we want to have a great connection, but it's also about the spherical nature, right? Because we're human. So there's a groundedness that we must establish in order to really make things happen in our physical life, right? Especially if you're a householder, right? I'm sure the Tibetan monks, 8 hours meditation, connecting source energy, Holy Spirit, and woo, they're really in a high, altitude of frequency and vibration and dimension. But if you're a householder, you're working on being more spherical, right? Which is about connecting to source energy so that you can bring the information into your grounded physical life, right? In order to share that, in order to bring that into an actual tangible reality, where it's not just an imagination or a visualization or some astral travel, but it's actually something that it's become a reality. It's something that you can tangibly experience and you can tangibly share with someone else, right? So a lot of the householder practice is about that. We're working with the caliber, right? The caliber. So I think a lot of, divine timing for me, and how I've been more of the leader divine timing rather than just kind of passively waiting, is my ability to bring growth, right? Bring growth. Like, for example, this is a great example of my sort of leadership of divine timing. Okay, so at a very young age, well, teenage, right? About, 16, 17, I had this idea, right, that I wanted to move to Nashville, Tennessee. I was living in Virginia. I was still in high school, right? And I took it upon myself to orchestrate the divine timing through my willingness to grow, and how I created that growth in the timeline of me going to Nashville as I started to go there. Traveling wise, I started to participate in Nashville, Tennessee, and the creative community there. And when the time came, right, and this was taking growth for years. Wasn't just something of, the idea and then next month, right? This is a growth, a sort of, I had to transform, right, in order to be a vibrational match with the timeline of going to Nashville, Tennessee. So if I didn't actively create the growth to align with the timeline that is Nashville, I could have gone to Nashville, but I could have gone later, right? Later, I could have gone when I was like 22, right? But because I took divine timing in my own hands, where I started to be a leader of divine timing, okay, connecting to my intuition, understanding, okay, this is the reality I want to hold, and I want to uphold this kind of caliber in order to be successful in this reality, right? So there's a growth I have to have, right? Because it's like we're jumping from different realms, and these different realms, they require, it's like we can't just like go into them, right? They require certain growth, and the more that we start to go into realms that are more creative, it's going to require more of creativity out of us, emotionally, psychologically, mentally, right? So when I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, again, when you make quantum leaps in your life, right? Either you're trying to break through generational curses, ancestral trauma, it's gonna require a character development. So because I had these years of character development from like age 16, where I moved at age 19, right after a month after high school graduation, I already had this mindset, right? I already had this certain growth where moving to Nashville again was like, it felt uncomfortable. It felt nervous. Probably the first, 6 months, 8 months, there was just this feeling of like, am I capable of holding, right, this timeline? Can I hold this timeline, right? Because when you're doing something that maybe has never been done before on all your, your ancestors, or something that is very liberating in a way that kind of it sort of rattles your subconscious, right, or sort of breaks down your limiting beliefs, right? So because I already had this growth that I took upon myself almost fearlessly, right? Going into Nashville was quite, right? I made that timeline, right? So I think divine timing, it really isn't okay by age 25 or age 35, right? I think a lot of people think of like it's a certain year, right? I think that our willingness to grow can expedite everything, right? It can actually, when we take a leadership over divine timing, yes, it may not happen next month, 6 months. Like for me, right? Moving to Nashville happened maybe 4 years after the initial sort of growth, going down that kind of growth in pathway, right? But when we take the passive approach where we're just waiting, and sometimes and we're waiting in a place of frustration or obsession or anger, or we're waiting in a victimization or a powerlessness, I feel like divine timing can be like, it becomes very aloof, because right, it becomes very aloof, where I mean it's still there because the idea is there, but since you're not making a bridge, it can't get to you, right? It can't really get to you. So there's a bridge we have to create, because so many people have ideas, it's just it becomes aloof, right? Where you know, it doesn't have a sort of bridge to get to you. So I think a bridge that we create is our willingness to grow, right? And we can talk about the sort of like visualization, right? I used to do a lot of that before I moved to Nashville. Visualization, sort of affirmation, and a participation, character development. And it's all divinely guided by your intuition. So the alertness is how you're able to grab opportunities. Like another example, I remember being in Nashville, Tennessee, that my mother had had a job that she didn't like. Okay. And this job was very, I'm sure we all have had someone or ourselves where very almost damaging, right? And I felt intuitively a new job, and I would, this was months before this new job came in. Okay, I felt intuitively that this job was going to have an opening and that she was going to go into this new job. Okay, which was a lot more, it was a quantum leap, a liberation. But the bridge to get this idea into the physical is I felt she had to leave the job that she was in because of how she felt, right? There was such a feeling of lack that would not necessarily be fertile to this new job that wants to come in, right? There's a certain mindset or certain space that she would have to hold for this to come in. So we did, again, we prepared for that, right? When you do something that is going to be a tremendous growth or liberation, you're going to get a huge reaction from your subconscious, all the fears in that, from all kinds of, you're going to feel really a real reaction, right? From the universe and from you, right? When you make big, bold moves that are coming from a place of liberation and trust in the divine. So she did that, and we had enough savings to experience that, right? Where she was, I think it was 2 months, and then this job came in, right? And this new job that she had was such exactly what intuitively our alertness was aware of, that this job had such a lot better experience, right? So, divine timing is in our leadership. She could have stayed, at this job for, she could have allowed fear and stayed at this job for a lot longer, right? I'm sure we all have had people that stayed at a job a lot longer because there's just not the growth required to make that bridge, right? But in that time where she was making that bridge within that 2 months, it was not necessarily easy. It was not comfortable, right? It was extremely liberating, but it was not comfortable, right? From a mother who's working since like 15, right? Very not comfortable, right? So, but there was so much growth that happened in just this 2 months, to the point where so much this sort of expedited growth happened to the point where she could align with this new job that was already, the idea was already there, it was already in her orbit. It's just about creating that sort of, I call that sort of lasso, and lassoing it in. And that's going to require a certain kind of energy, a caliber. Like if you're in a low energy, how are you going to lasso something in your orbit and pull it in, right? You need a lot of energy to do that. And growth gives you energy, right? Then I'll share another experience, okay, of being a leadership over divine timing. So we're always going to get ideas, right? Always going to get ideas. And the divine timing is on our willingness to grow when we feel ready, right? But ready is not necessarily, we think ready is that everything is in order, is perfect. Everything is constantly perfectly imperfect because everything is shifting and transforming. So nothing really is in this perfect balance forever. Everything is in a balance, and then it gets off balance and then finds balance. It's never like, the readiness is simply your willingness to be uncomfortable. Because ready is not, okay, I'm perfectly comfortable, now I'm ready for this thing. No, a lot of times, divine timing, when it comes to like anchoring in like a fifth dimensional reality, is something that is not going to be comfortable. Right? I think a lot of people, the divine timing is associated with like a new job, like a relationship, and all of that is really like fifth dimensional concepts when you're thinking about prosperity, or you're thinking about reciprocity and love, or higher love. So the readiness is simply you've gathered enough growth, right, to the point where you're comfortable with going into the uncomfortable in order to expand yourself, right? So another example of divine timing, the leadership over divine timing. So living in Nashville, Tennessee, about 5 years, right? And I had this idea, right? It seemed quite revolutionary, right? To move to LA. So I knew this just came to me when I was just doing a Kundalini yoga, right? I remember I was doing this powerful sort of meditation where you're just sort of punching the air with your arms, your fists, for like, I think it was like a 15-minute, right? Sort of Kriya, Kriya. And I had this idea about moving to LA. And the thing is, this idea was already in my outer orbit when I was young, right? Something that actually my mother kind of had that in her orbit. And then because I had enough growth, because of Nashville, Tennessee, I had enough growth where I pulled it closer into my orbit to the point where it came into my view. And then I saw it and I was like, I started to integrate that into my embodiment, right? Because I had enough growth, I had a particular vibration or caliber that can match that, right? And before, when I was younger, the idea of LA was more of an outer orbit, because I didn't have the growth required to be able to hold that, right? That caliber or that vibration that is LA, right? So because of the Nashville, Tennessee, and the certain growth that I've had, in this place, I had a sort of vibration that could hold the LA, right? And compared to Nashville, Tennessee to like LA, it's a big leap vibration wise. You have to hold a certain prosperity vibration to live in LA. I'm sure we all know, right? You have to have a certain caliber, certain character development to hold it here, unless you have generational wealth, right? And that's why a lot of people, young people, are in let's say a sort of vibration of like, prosperity, being able to hold be in LA and hold a kind of caliber of, prosperities because of generational wealth. But if you don't necessarily have that generational wealth, you're going to have to sort of create immense growth, right? So for me, I was in that like immense growth. So for a whole year, because there was a timeline that I wanted. It was like a particular year and a particular month in that year that I wanted, because I knew my alertness was telling me that a doorway would open in April, August of a certain year, right? Of the year that we moved. But I knew, in order to really grab that, right? Because I knew it was not going to be easy. I knew it was going to be a lot more challenging than going to Nashville, Tennessee. So what I did almost every day for an entire year, like straight up, I created the caliber, which creating caliber to go to Nashville, from that caliber, again, it was an adjustment. But the one from Nashville to LA, that was an even bigger sort of expansion that was required out of me, right? So I did that. And what happened is the doorway opened. It was a portal that I felt, a very fertile time, and a job opportunity came in. And I remember we took a risk to get there, and that was putting in our notice. And we didn't even have an apartment really in LA, because apartments it's not necessary, it's not easy, right? Talk about manifestation, right? In LA. But right when we were traveling, we were in Arkansas, and the call came in, right, from Tennessee going to Arkansas to LA. Call came in about the job offer that was an actual legitimate strong offer, or you know what I'm saying? But in order to take that risk, right, we had to have a certain caliber, right? A lot of people wouldn't take these type of risks. They would just wait for divine timing and just wait for it to be perfect and it to be perfectly aligned and something like that, not realizing that it really is in our growth, right? When we show up to our creative destiny, the angels show up in ways of miracle and miracle. So, a lot of times divine timing is it's a lot to do with not just our willingness to take risks, because everything when I look back, is everything has been a risk. It's not just taking impulsive risks, it's actually taking risks that are intuitively led, because these things were risks, but I was prepared for them. I had some growth, I had intuitive awareness, I knew about the portals, I knew about the challenges. And again, you don't know about everything, but you create some kind of growth emotionally or psychologically, where if these challenges come in, you already have a victory mindset, right? And that's the difference between like going for something or creating some kind of change and then kind of backing off, backing down, say, okay, well, I'm not good enough, so, why try, right? Or why continue to try? So I think divine timing, how we can really work it in our favor, is to really understand that it's about our growth, our emotional, our mental, our psychological growth. Because everything about calling in a partner, calling in prosperity, calling in something, right? Divine timing is usually about you're trying to align with something that's expansive. And that's why it's going to require a certain caliber, and you're going to need to do some kind of evolution work, right? Right? Like divine timing, even for the planet, right? It's all dependent on our willingness to grow, right? If we go through a spiritual awakening, the divine timing for Earth and these certain, 5D consciousness that will happen can come in, sooner, or can come in later. It all just depends on our alertness, and our willing to use the intuition to pay attention. So, I think with like relationships, for example, I think with divine timing, sometimes people get impatient, like they're doing work, they're doing growth, they're taking chances, or they're doing some sort of, emotional healing, and, they're not getting the results they want, right? And I think the one thing that we can do is we can start to settle, right? That because, and I think when we start to feel that way, that's when we have to keep going, right? To keep going, to keep, do your mantra, or, do whatever it is that's giving you growth. That, it's more growth internally, like an emotional or mental or psychological growth, because what spiritually grows materially shows. And that bridge from 5D to 3D is a bridge that comes through your mind. It's a bridge that you create with your mind, right? And the best way to strengthen your mind is to go into experiences, to have experiences that will expand your mind and expand the opportunity for you to make better decisions, right? The one thing that when we start to, feel the divine timing is aloof is when we're kind of getting comfortable with not making decisions with our mind, with allowing time to just kind of go off. Time is so, just expansive. It's like the Big Bang. It's just massive. And we can just let time just go by, right? Because time is like, right? Just go by and just stay in this sort of aloofness, and not realizing that, wait a minute, there's a bridge I have to create. If I want to get this orbit, right? If I want to make this connection, there's a bridge I have to create, right? So I think with, divine timing, when we get impatient, right? Where we're not honest with ourselves about our growth, right? And we just I just want it now, or just give me that thing now. What we can do is we can start, we can invite in things that maybe we don't need. Like, we don't necessarily need these type of relationships in our life, but we created it out of a place of, it can even be a place of just wanting to grow, right? Like, you want to have a relationship. You may not necessarily think it's the one, or, it could be a very, like a soulmate that is very empowering and inspiring for you. And that can be a way of growth, a catalyst, something that expands your mind to be able to get to the next level. But then there's also kind of relationships where we get into it as distraction, right? Like, we want so much to yearn for love or comfort, or intimacy, but we're not willing to do the growth. We're scared of the growth. And that's the place where we start to attract relationships that are distraction, where anything that does not require growth, where we don't have to be honest with ourselves, we don't have to be alert, we don't need to listen to our intuition. Those are the type of relationships where it can be of distraction, right? Right. So anything, if we're asking for something, we're basically saying that we're going to be alert, we're going to listen to our intuition, and there's some kind of growth that we're going to take upon ourselves. And that's the thing, when people get stagnant, they get angry about their stagnation, is because they've stunned their growth. They've told, somewhere along the line, they told themselves that they want to stop growing. They carry a belief system, right? Especially about love. Like, oh, I'm never going to love again. And they, and it stunts their growth, because love is not just about a person. It's also about emotional maturity. So a lot of people who have that kind of thing, you see them in like 35, 45, and it's like, they're like a child, right? And then what happens is, what spiritually, right, grows, materially shows, is that the material realm, it starts to, right? It starts to become just a sort of reality that, right? That kind of is mirroring back to that person, that emotional immaturity, where things are shallow, things are like not fulfilling, or there's somewhat meaningless, mindless, stuff like that, right? So, even with prosperity in like a career, right? For me, it was always the visualizing, right? It was always months. Sometimes it's months, or even like you get an idea and there's some kind of growth you have to have. It could be confidence, right? There's some kind of confidence. Like, if you want to work with a company that has a particular caliber of confidence, you have to match that, right? So that means there's a growth that you take upon yourself to make that happen. And anything, when you do growth, it's a risk. And that's why I think people, it's like they want this thing and they know that there's divine timing, but the risk is like some growth that has to happen, right? You're investing in something and you're not sure if you're going to get the return investment when you want it. So a lot of people, instead of going in that risk and, doing that, expansion of the mind and what they can manifest, they just, okay, I'm not going to take this risk because, I don't have enough intuition that if things don't go out the way I want it to go, that I can like keep it together, or I can take care of myself, or I can mediate the situation. So that's why everything, at the end of the day, any risk you take, you have to, the first thing is the intuition, because divine timing, there are portals, and we can miss those portals, and we can push it back, right, to another portal opening, and maybe in another year, right? And it's your intuition, your alertness is how not only you're able to take the risk and to keep going, right? But also to grab those portals and to make things happen in those portals. Because it's true, we only have, we're only in this body for a certain amount of time, and then we transmute this body into something else, right? So timeless, right? We really want to grab time. And I think that's why everything, meditation, mindfulness is all about grabbing time and doing something with it that gives you the immense expansion or the incarnational like development that you want. And I think with my kind of relationship with divine timing, there's like an acceptance I have for taking risks, right? And that the closer I'm moving towards creative reality, the more the stronger the bridge is when it comes to me and the 5D and me being able to bring these ideas, and almost like I can, I bring those ideas and get them into the physical in a way that becomes quite miraculous. Because the more that we do become grounded in our risks, where we are listening to our intuition without delay, and that takes a certain caliber of expansion to be able to take risks or follow your intuition without delay. That's where we're starting to be in the 5D frequency, where we may 3D, but we're actually starting to hold a 5D reality. And I think that's what we're all trying to do, is hold the 5D reality where we're so in sync with time, so in sync with the earth, the portals, that the idea comes in. And because we have such a growth, right, a mindfulness about our expansion of the mind, that we can actually bring it in almost simultaneously, where there isn't this big delay in our life because we're not paying attention. I think the big delay in these things is because we're not paying attention to the alertness, or we don't have enough strength around our intuition. And that means we have to, the strength around the intuition is key to the development wise. And then also our alertness, our ability to grab time, to pay attention, to be in sync with the earth. And the more that we become disconnected and disembodied and caught in these projections, illusions, and non-realities, we find our life is just this delay. But we can get a lot done in a single life. And that's the mastery of Nikola Tesla and Yogi Bhajan. They teach that there's a lot that can be done in a single lifetime, but it's going to require strength around intuition to keep going. Because whenever you're doing a 5D concept in a 3D type of, age, we'll say, of humanity, right? The human mind, it's going to be an expansion that it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's not necessarily going to seem like it fits initially. But a part of why we go and create these bridges, and why we bring these 5D concepts into a more limited plane, that reality, that dimension we're in, is because we want to upgrade the dimension that we're in, so that we can bring more of a creative reality and less of like a mediocrity type of dimension, where we're making excuses and we're giving into fear too much, and we're creating these delays. Because humans love to reincarnate, but that can also be what you call there can be a negative to that, where since you know that you can reincarnate again, you think that, oh, okay, well, I'll just do it next life. Oh, okay, well, I didn't do that life, I'll do it the next life. And then what happens is it becomes a pattern of do it next life, right? And I think it's not necessarily what we want to do, right? Like I say, really, when you're in timeless energy, it's not, I gotta do this. Like, usually it's just an embodiment you want to have. It's a kind of development you want to have. It's an arc-line auric field development that you want to have in a lifetime. So it's not necessarily like we think of like a job title or sort of credential, right? In the, outside of this, this 3D reality and in higher realms, it's more so of an embodiment that you want to develop, an arc line, an auric field type of development. So coming into this earth, it's really the thing that we want is to have more of a relationship with creative reality. And the more that we have a relationship with creative reality, the more expansion we have. The more expansion we have, we start to bring a certain embodiment that is higher, that is a higher frequency, that can be a match to more of the 5D concepts, such as prosperity, reciprocity, generational wealth, because prosperity is a 5D concept. It doesn't necessarily belong to the 3D. It's a higher vibrational space holder. So if we want to hold a higher vibrational space holder, then there's some kind of expansion that we need to have in the mind, because we all have limitation and belief systems that if we don't check them and we don't kind of bring an alertness to that and really get real and honest with ourselves about that, our whole life can just be a delay. Our whole life can be just a mediocrity in the way that we are just waiting, where we're just being passive, where we're just, oh, well, I'm just not good enough, so why even try? So that's why it's absolutely important that we have some kind of spiritual practice, right? Because when we think about the spiritual practice, it's a way for us to bring victory into the constant risks that we're taking when we face fear and we choose love. That's a risk, right? Because there's not necessarily something you get from that, right? I mean, you feel good, but it's not necessarily something that, it's something that you have to do again and again, and it's something very unknown. But if we do it again and again, we start to get a sort of a character development, and then that starts to open the door to higher possibilities, more excellent possibilities that we could experience on this earth. So divine timing is on our willingness to grow. We can be passive, and a lot of people are passive and waiting, and that passiveness and that waiting thing can be very much just the fear of the unknown, the fear of taking the risk, the fear of opening up. And we can stay in that, and that's fine, and stay in that. But at the same time, if we're wanting growth, right, if we're wanting some kind of expansion or something, and we're just passively waiting around for some kind of sign or some kind of thing, we can start to step out of our leadership. We can start to feel like we're not a creator. Because sometimes, time is so, like I said, it's so just awesome in a big, immense way, right? Where just because something is not seeming to be happening at this moment, or the more that we just give growth and just accept that risks that we're taking, it doesn't matter necessarily the year or whatever month or day that whatever alignment happens, right? That's beyond our control, right? There's a kind of creative reality that we hold. And that creative reality, the more that we develop that, even if it's not whatever, we're not getting this job when we want it, this relationship we want it, when we are aligning with this creative reality, there's so many other things that we start to download and we start to integrate from the 5D. And what happens is our whole sort of our whole just household household practice, right? It just naturally starts to reflect the creative reality and all the risks that we're taking towards making this incarnation a complete one. Because a lot of time, again, the reincarnation, oh, just next life. And that's the one thing I don't like to say is the next life, or, right? A lot of people have that passive waiting where it just becomes like, okay, next life. I think when you get a relationship with creative reality, you understand that this is the time for us to be complete. And we must have whatever growth we need to hold that completion in this life, because if we're just chasing this next life or this waiting around and passive, I mean, we can just get into a habit of multiple incarnations, and this is the time. We don't need, I mean, we have many lifetimes, right, for mastery, because life is so expansive that, it's like you can't really get it in one lifetime, right? But when you start to have a certain growth in your intuition, right, in your caliber, right, as a soul, in your human experience, you start to realize that in a lifetime we want to complete ourselves. In a lifetime we want to have a complete relationship with creative reality, where we want to really become alert and awaken to how we can become a lot more of a leader of this sort of immense, infinite reality dimensions that we're in, so that our imagination can have a direct materialization in the physical. And I think so many people want that, right? But they don't know where the growth to be had, right? Where's the growth to be had? So that's why we go back to the intuition. If we don't know the growth to be had, is going into the intuition. Because your intuition, it's not a cognitive, you need to do this. It's more of you're going to be led. You're going to have a feeling, you're going to have an urge, you're going to have an eagerness, you're going to have enthusiasm for something, you're going to have an idea. And we get ideas so many times knocking on our doors, just a lot of people don't actually take action on those ideas because they don't have enough of groundedness, which is about participating. And knowing participation is both risk, failure, and also it's that challenge is gonna, anything about being grounded, it seems somewhat of a challenge, right? But there's a kind of a wanting to learn. And that's the difference between getting the idea knocking on your door and just kind of sitting around for years and years and actually, you know what? I want to learn about this further. I want to actually have some kind of courage to go into this idea, to create some kind of reality where I can have a physical experience of that, to understand how I can be better at bringing ideas into a physical realm, right? So even if you have an idea, just come, taking a class at a community college, right? In doing that, it's sort of solidifying a relationship with creative reality, where you're starting to just understand how to bring ideas and how to kind of get them in a physical form. And I think the more that we have that practice, then we can start to do bigger ideas, right? And because we become more dynamic, the more that we kind of bring these ideas into a physical, we start to gather more skills and talents in the ways that we can kind of move time and space. Because every time we make, have an idea and you bring it in a physical, it's different each time. It's not just the same thing. So we become more dynamic, right? To be brilliant is to be very well-rounded in the ways that you can sort of alchemize things, right? Like a problem solving. And the more that we do that with, simple ideas such as painting a picture, right? And actually completing that versus like bigger ideas, which is maybe like an online business or something like that. We just become a lot more ingenious and have a lot more of expansion to our risks and the ability to know how to mediate these risks and to be more feeling into the portals, the openings of earth in connection to the risks that we're taking. But when we're detached and desensitized and disconnected and not listening to our intuition, we become stubborn, we become fixed, we become obsessed, paranoid. We become really just, wrapped up into something that we just, the belief system that is just keeping us caged. And all of that, is coming, it can be very like, it's kind of, it can come to us as like a, what do you call? Like, we think that we're waiting. We're really in this obsession and we say, oh, well, I'm waiting, but we're in this obsession. Or we're in this kind of paranoia, or with this like lack of trust or intuition, but really we're just saying, oh, I'm just waiting for the divine timing. But really we know that we're not really entirely being honest with ourselves. So anything about whatever it is that we want to like manifest, reality, 5D concepts into the physical, there's a sort of honesty that we have to have with ourselves. And if we don't have an honesty with ourselves, we got to create that. Right? Because that's our way of building up an authenticity, so that when we're taking risk, we actually feel like we're in alignment, that we actually have strength around it, that we're actually coming from a place of authentically wanting to have some kind of mastery over creative reality. And then having that intuition gives us enough faith, we can say, or just enough natural patience that is not necessarily waiting or being passive, a patience where you feel complete, where you are feel complete with just your relationship creative reality. There's nothing, you don't need to have this or have that or have all these things, because that can become obsession. The best way of creating that bridge from the 5D into the 3D is our relationship with creative reality being complete, where we are taking certain risks, chances, right? It could even just be alone with yourself. It could be dating, right? But it could be just being alone with yourself. It's whatever it is that makes you somewhat uncomfortable, but it's coming from a place of completion. Like when I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, there was a feeling of completion, right, that I had because of the growth that I took upon myself, right? That growth I took upon myself led to this feeling of completion that kind of gave way, right, to this next level. So whatever it is that we're feeling we need to complete, like some kind of growth or life lesson, or we can say just something, that a belief system that we need to wrap up, right? That completion, it's when it comes from a place of feeling content with the creative reality, feeling content with, it's not even a content as like perfect. It's uncomfortable, but it's like content with the decision to evolve beyond what it is that I thought I am, or thought I was, or think I am, or how I should do things, or where I've been and who I've with, and these type of just vibration that I've been holding. When you start to feel like a content with like becoming more of yourself, right? Becoming like embodying more of yourself, like you feel, there's a sense of completion. I'm ready to integrate or download more of myself. that's when, right, we start to move into the next level. That's when the door opens, and that's when we walk across the bridge. So I try to bring this to you in a way that is expansive yet simple to understand. But I just feel with people in divine timing, sometimes people in divine timing can be very passive, like waiting, but then there's also these obsessions, and there's also these like over analyzing, and really there's a lot of stagnation. There's not entirely being honest with themselves, and there's not entirely like growth, right? Like we think we're having growth because we're wanting something or wanting something to happen, but then really we're not entirely being honest with ourselves about what it is that we truly, like the creative reality we really want to have. Or the growth that we need to, the kind of growth that we need to have within ourselves. Because we want so much for this thing to happen, or so much for this thing to go our way. But really, at the end of the day, divine timing is simply getting more alert about our creative reality. And the more alert we become, the more opportunities we have to experience our growth, to become more well-rounded, to become more complete within the sort of integration of the 5D energy, or the downloading of this 5D energy, and really holding a bigger aura, right? I think that's really how we're able to make divine timing not something that's so out of orbit, but something that's really in an inner orbit. Is the bigger the energy, right? Like the aura, the bigger the aura, the more expansive, the more things that you're tapped into, the more things that are in your orbit, because you're not just a small planet, you're starting to become bigger. You have a stronger magnetic pull. Your magnetic field is going further out into, we call, dimensions or the universe. So therefore you have access to more things in your field. And therefore, the more things that you have access, magnetizing wise in your field, you have more of of gathering of information that you can use. Because the connection to creative reality gives you more information. It gives you more insight into the vastness of experiences, the situations, and kind of scenarios that can happen on Earth. But you don't get obsessed with the storylines, right? You get absolutely brilliant about the narrative that you're telling, and you get more inventive with your narrative. You get more like incredible and just wow, my narrative can be one that is even more expressive or accomplished or victorious, right? The narrative I'm creating is going to become more of a breakthrough. It's going to have so much victory. It's going to be more aligned with a creative reality and less in the mediocrity, because my narrative is being led by my willingness to grow and the kind of alertness I have towards risks and towards taking chances and towards letting go of things, towards being honest about my belief systems, being honest about what kind of incarnation completion do I want to have, and what kind of caliber, character, and kind of creativity or knowledge, education do I require to be able to hold this narrative. Because one thing is like, I want this narrative, but then we have no caliber, character, or creativity, right? There's so many of like, I want this particular narrative, and then there's obsession, and then there's like grief, and then there's anger, and then there's all of this like stagnation, because of this narrative requires a certain radiance that we're going to have to show up for and participate in. And that may be, guess the thing, and when you're in, working on this, whatever it is, this caliber, character, creativity, I mean, whatever divine time, it could be years of whatever you meet the life partner, have that particular job or this house or something like that, or this business. But it's not something that is in vain. It's something that it's like you have such a completion within just the day of whatever creative reality you're doing. Divine timing doesn't become a passive waiting. It doesn't become a waiting at all. It starts to become a victory that you have within your incarnation. In your relationship with your incarnation is your victory. Because you know that you are really becoming alert, and you're really starting to pay attention, and you're really starting to connect with these portals and these activations and these doorways that are opening, these sort of gateways, or these vibrations that are moving through you, that downloading through you, and you're starting to put them into your household, your household mandala, we'll say. So the household mandala, it becomes so radiant itself because of whatever, going deep with that work that you're doing with whatever it is. When you rattle and shake and start to move things around, and you're not just going for the subconscious stuff and not just, lingering in the doubt or the fear stuff, you really use your spiritual practice to become more of the fearless energy. Your household mandala becomes so much more brilliant, because you're allowing yourself to have education, or to gather knowledge, or to get even experience that may not necessarily be easy, to be complete, for you to complete that, for you to go into it, or to go through it and see in which ways you can actually have an even stronger intuition. Because again, at the end of the day, it's all about the strong intuition, and the things we need to go into, or we go into just unconsciously or just out of subconscious programming, so that we can get the sting, right? Get the whatever it is that kind of wakes us up. Because a lot of people are in this life with no sort of alertness or paying attention, nor sort of intuitive kind of transmission, and therefore feel the mediocrity, and then don't feel complete, and don't feel that they've really accessed the creative reality within themselves. And then they feel the timid, they feel timid, they feel overpowered, they feel intimidated by creative reality. But we are creative reality. So when we're timid and we're overthinking and being overreactional, or we're intimidated, we're overpowered, is because there's some kind of disconnect with that intuitive, clear awareness that we are definitely a part of this creative reality. We just need to build a grounded container in which we have, we know how to access it. We know how to use it. I think that's the difference, is that we're a part of it, but learning how to access it and use it is different. We have to have a container. And we don't just get a container just by, there's something that we must initiate. There's a kind of rite of passage that we need to have. So when we think about anything of Buddhism or Kundalini technology, it's really about, you're opening a door to go into another door, to become more spherical, to see how well-rounded your strength can be. Your intuition is very well-rounded, right? So when you do something, it's initially hard, and then you start to go deeper into it and you start to feel, okay, I've broke through that block. That's why the mind over matter practices can be so liberating. That's why I chose Kundalini Yoga as my mind over matter practice, because you go into these kriyas, and when you're, initially it can feel like you're getting in touch with a limitation. And then the more that you kind of build your caliber, your character, in the way that you're relating to that limitation from a place of breakthrough rather than, excuses and I, not good enough, then you start to kind of understand more about creative reality and the human limit in the human finite. And the human finite may present itself as a limitation, but that's why we have the mind, right? Because we can get really restrictive and really limiting here on earth. But that mind is our access to that creative reality. That really is the bridge that gives us enough alertness, or gives us enough kind of sight where we can have a sort of auric field or arc line, a kind of tangible connection or relationship with the incarnation, to be able to bring this information of the 5D or the creative reality into our physical in a way that gives us a physical experience of what it is to bring such creative reality, or such, you can say, brilliant ideas of what you want to create or manifest, into an actual doorway that we walk through, and a visualization that becomes a materialization. And the kind of process of that comes from the energy that we develop within this container that we are. The energy that we develop through the education, through the knowledge, through gathering resources, through the self-esteem, whatever it is. It's the refining of our own energy that gives us that kind of most extraordinary experience, where we have the visualization and we kind of it comes into a materialization. And it's not just seeing that just happen, like, oh, happens because you're part of generational wealth, or your daddy made it happen. No, it's something that you created out of your own intuitive alertness and your own intuitive, like, paying attention, to the point where you allowed yourself to grow beyond any limitation that you've been holding, that has created some kind of mediocrity in you. So I'm going to leave you guys with these thoughts. We could go all day with this sort of exploration of the universe through the higher mind. So thank you.